On Easter Sunday, 1987, in the mountains of Southern California, biologists set the last trap of a years-long capture program. They had been heading toward this decision for several years. There was no consensus among the experts. Some insisted on the capture, while others were dead set against it, because catching the last wild bird of this species meant officially admitting that a free population would no longer exist at all. That morning, a large bird with a bare, dark head, dark plumage, and a wingspan of almost 3 meters was caught in the trap. It was given the designation AC9 and the name Topa-Topa. This was the last known wild individual of the species on the entire planet. The species in question is called the California condor. The bird was taken to an enclosure where the other few surviving condors already lived, and with it, the total population of the species, both wild and in captivity, reached 27 birds. By that time, biologists faced an almost impossible task: how to revive an entire species from such a small group. After all, this bird only begins to reproduce at 6 years of age and lays a single egg about once every year or two. And even if they managed to bring the species back to several hundred birds, could they survive in the wild alongside the most dangerous predator on Earth? Man. The California condor is considered the largest flying bird in North America. An adult's wingspan exceeds 9.5 feet, and its weight can reach up to 11 kilograms, making the condor a true heavyweight among the continent's birds of prey, with few that can match its size. The condor's plumage is dark, almost black, and on the underside of its wings, broad white stripes show through, visible even from the ground. Its bare head is not without feathers by chance. During feeding from a carcass, feathers would quickly get dirty. Individual birds can live up to 60 years, a rarity among wild birds. The condor soars to an altitude of up to 15,000 feet and glides there for hours, barely flapping its wings, simply riding the air currents. The lineage of the California condor goes much deeper than it might seem at first glance. Tens of thousands of years ago, mammoths and saber-toothed cats roamed the territory of modern-day California, and giant ancient birds, the teratorns, soared in the sky above them. When the Ice Age ended, the megafauna disappeared almost all at once. Mammoths, saber-toothed cats, and the teratorns themselves, whose wingspan rivaled the condors. For a scavenger that fed only on carcasses, this meant the almost complete loss of its usual food source. The California condor survived where the teratorns couldn't. It switched to scavenging along the coast, and the carcasses of beached whales and other marine mammals became its new meal ticket for thousands of years to come, helping it survive this catastrophe. The California condor has almost no sense of smell, a rarity among birds that find food by scent. Instead, it relies on its sharp eyesight, circling high above its territory for hours and looking for prey below, also taking cues from the behavior of other nearby scavengers. By cleaning up the carcasses of dead animals quickly, the condor prevents them from decomposing in the open for weeks, and thus slows the spread of diseases among the local wildlife. Without scavengers, the carcasses would pile up and attract carriers of infections and rodents. The population of the California condor plummeted throughout the 20th century to catastrophic levels, and there were several reasons for this. The open lands of the American Southwest were actively being developed and plowed for agriculture, and with that, the open spaces where the condor was used to finding carcasses disappeared. Farmers and ranchers would set out poisoned bait for wolves and coyotes, trying to protect their livestock. Condors, feeding on these same carcasses, would die by accident, simply being the wrong animal for which the poison was intended. And entire families would be lost because of a single piece of bait. Collisions with power lines were another problem. For a bird with such a large wingspan, this turned out to be a new type of deadly obstacle that hadn't even existed a century ago. Illegal trapping by taxidermists and the hunting of bird eggs by collectors sealed the deal. Lead was another cause of death. Condors would feed on the carcasses of animals shot by hunters, and along with the meat, swallow tiny lead fragments left in the wound. Even a small dose of lead proved fatal for the large bird. Dichlorodiphenyl trichloroethane, widely used as a pesticide in the mid-20th century, would get into the ocean and build up in the tissues of marine animals that the coastal California condors fed on, which in turn caused the bird's eggshells to become thin. The egg would crack under its own weight even before the chick hatched, and the species' natural reproduction was blocked for two reasons at once: thin eggshells due to the pesticide and lead, which killed the adult birds before they could even produce offspring. By 1982, all these reasons combined had pushed the species to the brink. There were only 22 California condors left in the wild, and the rest were already in captivity. By the mid-1980s, biologists faced an agonizing choice. Threats continued to kill the remaining wild California condors, and the question arose whether to capture every single last bird for a captive breeding program. Some experts were dead set against such a move. They believed that if the species was destined to disappear, the bird should die free, not in a cage, and that the very act of capturing the last wild individuals went against the very essence of the wild. The debate went on for several years and had no easy solution for either side. In the end, the decision was made to capture all the remaining wild California condors and to focus the future of the species on a captive breeding program. To save the species, people had to invent methods that had never existed anywhere before, and they didn't have to wait long for proof of success. In 1988, the first chick born in captivity hatched at the San Diego Zoo. He was named Moloko. For the team of biologists, the hatching of the chick was the first real confirmation that the remaining 27 California condors could actually breed in captivity, meaning the entire program, which many people didn't believe in, had a future. To raise the chick without turning it into a tame bird attached to humans, the San Diego Zoo used an unusual method, feeding it with a puppet shaped like an adult condor's head, while the keepers remained completely hidden from the chick's sight. The idea was simple. If the chick never saw a human near its food, it would grow up able to recognize its own kind. This is how the chicks nicknamed Janan and Wisa were raised. And for years, keeper Ron Webb held the puppet over the feeder, staying out of sight. The method didn't work perfectly right out of the gate. The first condors raised with the puppet and released into the wild behaved strangely. They would land on rooftops, get too close to people, and perch on dangerous power lines, risking their lives. The reason was that there were no adult condors around the young birds to show them the right way to behave in the wild. Michael Mace, the curator of birds at the San Diego Zoo Safari Park, was one of the first to point out this problem. They found a solution pretty quickly. They started releasing the young condors along with more experienced mentor birds. Around their older relatives, the young ones gradually picked up the right behaviors, and dangerous habits like landing on power lines became less common. The puppet and mentorship didn't solve everything. The program was still short on chicks. That's when another method came into play, double clutching, which was designed to get 2 chicks instead of 1 from a single pair of condors each season. Condors lay 1 egg every year or 2, but if that egg is taken soon after being laid, the pair will often lay a second egg in the same season. The keepers would send the first egg to an incubator, and they would leave the second one for the parents to hatch. This way, the number of chicks available for the program nearly doubled without any harm to the parent pair. It was the combination of several methods at once, the puppet, mentorship, and double clutching, that made it possible to rebuild the species from just a handful of birds in captivity. In 1992, 5 years after the species was officially considered extinct in the wild, several captive-bred California condors were released back into the mountains of Southern California for the first time. To avoid being dependent on a single location, biologists decided to establish several independent wild flocks at once in different parts of the habitat, so a disaster in one region wouldn't threaten the entire population all over again. They began releasing the birds in the mountains of Southern California, at the Vermilion Cliffs on the border of Arizona and Utah, and also at several other spots along the California coast and on the Baja California Peninsula in Mexico. In 2003, the first California condor chick hatched by wild parents, not in a human enclosure, fledged in the wild. Something like that hadn't happened since 1981, for almost a quarter of a century. Even biologists who had studied the California condor inside and out for decades were surprised by the discovery. In 2021, geneticist Oliver Ryder and his colleagues from the San Diego Zoo published the results of rigorous genetic tests. The test proved that 2 chicks had hatched from unfertilized eggs, completely without the involvement of a male, even though both mothers were living near fertile partners at the time. The species had nearly vanished due to a shortage of birds, and here 2 of them managed without a male at all. This was the first confirmed case of its kind among birds that had access to a mate. Nevertheless, both of the chicks born in this unusual way never made it to adulthood, despite all the efforts of their caretakers. There is another side to the California condor's story, one that has nothing to do with genetics or enclosures. For biologists, the species return meant saving an endangered animal, but for the native Yurok people, it meant something more. In Northern California live the Yurok people, who call this bird Pregonish. For centuries, the condor has been a spirit of peace and renewal for the tribe, and its feathers have held a special place in their most important ceremonies for restoring balance. When the condor disappeared from Yurok lands in the early 20th century, the loss was felt more deeply than just the disappearance of a rare animal from the area. The tribe saw it as a break in their own tradition and a loss of connection to their ancestors. For almost 2 decades, the Yurok tribe prepared its own program to bring the condor back to its territory. They needed to assess the pollution in the area and build partnerships with Sequoia National Park and federal wildlife services. In 2022, the first California condors were released among the giant sequoia trees in Northern California, a place where the bird hadn't been seen in over a century. Tiana Williams-Clausen managed the program through all its stages. The lead we talked about earlier hasn't gone away. By 2019, a ban on lead ammunition for hunting had gone into effect in California, and yet lead remains the leading cause of death for wild condors. The sources of lead are broader than just legal hunting with new bullets, and compliance with the ban itself is still far from complete. Some hunters continue to use old ammunition, and carcasses with lead fragments still end up on the condor's table. Lead turned out not to be the only modern threat to the species. In 2023, an outbreak of highly pathogenic avian flu killed about 21 birds in a few weeks, almost a fifth of the population on the Arizona and Utah border. Ashley Blackford, the Species Recovery Program Coordinator, led the emergency response to this outbreak. To save the condors for the first time in history, they had to urgently test a flu vaccine on them that was originally created for poultry. The species also faces a more slow-burning threat. The more successfully the condors reproduce, the more birds are alive today in the wild and in captivity. But almost all of them still come from a handful of ancestors that survived the 1987 roundup. To avoid inbreeding and its related diseases, each breeding pair is selected according to a strict stud book, which records the lineage of almost every bird alive today, all the way back to those very first few ancestors. For the current number of free California condors to be sustainable long-term, several things are needed at once. Continued real enforcement of the ban on lead ammunition, not just its existence on paper, and expanded vaccination against avian flu. Careful management of genetic diversity through the stud book is also necessary, along with continuing to release birds at new locations within their range, like the Yurok tribal lands among the redwoods, where the condor managed to return home after more than a century of absence. Let's go back to Easter Sunday of 1987, to the hands of the people holding the last wild bird of this species, a C9, named Topa-Topa. At that moment, the species consisted of 27 individuals, and all of them were in cages. Today, free-flying flocks of California condors soar over the mountains of Southern California, over the Vermilion Cliffs, along the Big Sur coast, and among the redwoods on the lands of the Yurok tribe, places where the species was once thought to be completely lost. The species has already been brought back from just a handful of birds that were completely dependent on humans. The next challenge is tougher, to make it so the condor no longer needs constant saving from lead, disease, and its own narrow bloodline, but can stay in the sky on its own.